Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum. Now, Mixum printing is the smarter way to print. Printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials, and the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns. A bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. Obviously, Sam Quinlan was on a few weeks ago, and he actually showed what Mixum printing looks like on 47 Furious Tales. It's a great example of how that looks, and I have to hold my puppy. And right now, they actually offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now, listeners on my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. And believe me, and I'm sure you know, and my guest is going to tell you that every percentage point when you're printing something matters, especially whether you got $1,000 over your goal, $10,000, or you just got $250 over your goal. Every percentage point matters. And so you can type, that is mixam.com. I'm very distracted, my dog, very, very distracted, but you can type mixam.com, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab to get that 5% discount on your first order. And without further ado, I have comic creator and returning guest, David Green. So welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up? What's up, everybody? I think after that, I might try Mixum for the first time coming up. So,
hey, 5%. You know what it is? Every percentage counts. They do a great job with their printing. I like it. They offer a bunch of cool stuff going on. And obviously, everybody needs to do what's right for their printing, but I think Mixum does a great job. I may or may not be printing a comic sooner rather than later, and that's who I'm going with. And I know there's a lot of competition, but every Mixum product I've received has been great. So obviously, though, I do want to get into it because you have a Kickstarter going on, Conquered Crowns Amazons, and you are fully funded on Kickstarter, which you're sort of fully funded. And we're going to get into that, I promise. So what is the basic premise of this comic? Because it is very interesting, and it's a little bit different than what you've done in the past, and it's also a little bit more historic, and other stuff is going on with it. And my dog is very excited about your book. She's very excited about the book.
So yes, this is different than the Captivating Light, and what I wanted to do in this particular project was give people a story, almost like going into like Games of I was about to say Games of Crowns, Games of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is really it's really creative, and so I don't know if you remember on a previous Kickstarter, I had a character named Title, and he wasn't in this same universe as the women in this story, but I created him specifically for television, and so I pitched it to some management studios, and there was one that was actually interested. It didn't go anywhere though, but at least not yet. And I think that Wonder Woman dropped, the Wonder Woman movie or something like that. I can't really remember what actually sparked this story, but whatever the spark was, I said, you know what? I want to do my own version of the Amazon. And so I put the story together, and I got some feedback, and they were like, it's not quite it, because you're using some of the same formulas from other previously created stories about the Amazons. Like we were going to use some of the same locations and places, and they were like, it needs to be fresh, something different. And so then I said, okay, well, I'm gonna take a group out of Africa and make it kind of historical. But then I thought that I don't really feel like hearing, well, that's not right in history. Oh no, it didn't happen like that. I didn't feel like hearing that too much. I hear it now, but so what I decided to do was make it fantasy, and I took seven seven African queens throughout history, and I put them on one team. Now that was challenging because they all are leaders, and they all have some of the same qualities, but there's some differences so far as personality, and that's what I wanted to highlight.
And so obviously there's a lot going on here, and I really want to dive into the
Yeah.
story. And there is a bunch of different queens in this, and I'm gonna get the names wrong. I'm gonna try.
I did too. Yeah.
Okay, before I get attacked, I'm going to try. And I'm sure you're going to correct me. So I don't want any flack from anybody. You know, we're all adults here. I'm making an effort before we go too far into this. So I want it to be clear, but there's a lot of personality I'm getting at. And so I do want to talk about Okara or Okira.
Kira, yeah.
Okay, see. I'm sort of half right. And
1 for 1.
she's 27 and she's sort of very much into martial arts. She's very diplomatic, and obviously she was sort of sold into slavery very young, and she is also very politically astute, and she's sort of the leader, the de facto leader. I mean, they're all leaders, they all can lead, and they all sort of, I think, in this comic lead at various points in it, but she's sort of the de facto leader, and she is the one who I think gathers everybody up or sort of forms the group to go and find their chief that was exiled for not wanting to pay, I guess, his taxes or his tribute that he wanted to pay. And so what was this like really building her out? Because she's inspired by Nzinga of Ndango, and obviously Queen Nzinga of Ndango, and I'm not as historically astute in African, queens and kingdoms and culture. But obviously, I'm assuming she was a very powerful woman, that queen.
Correct. I really wasn't either, and I started watching a guy we partnered with, Home Team History. It's a YouTube channel. And he focuses a lot on African history, and I started. And it's not just African history. You can find this story is following African history, but you'll see other histories from around the world. And I still wanted to stick with, kind of like real life and have it universal. So, but yeah, she's like the main woman that stuck out of all seven of them to me, and so that's why she got to be the leader.
And what is this like? Because obviously she has certain skill sets, and it's very interesting. And as we go into, Ramallah, I think it is the second woman, and she's 25. She's a horse trader. She's obviously a polyglot, very much treated much more masculine than the others. Even though she's not a guy, I want to get that clear off the table. I already know what people are thinking. But she also prostituted herself out. From her, and she sort of escaped from her homeland. She's also very, linguistical, and she wants to find a place. She wants to feel liberated, and also liberate her hometown. And I think Queen Bili. I'm not going to get that second queen names right. I'm not going to try. I quit before I start, but I think you're going to tell me who that name is pronounced. But it's very different with her and Okira, because they are very different in how they look, how they act, their personalities, and yet they're two very, very powerful women, and their personalities are definitely, I don't want to say they're clashing, but we know they can clash very easily.
Right. Yeah.
Because both of them have the same amount of power, and then we throw a third woman in there with Tanisha, who's 20 and who's a weapons expert and was essentially, built for battle. And I know this queen, Queen Amina. I know that queen in history.
Right.
And obviously, Tanisha saw her family pretty much get killed due to an ambush and hasn't seen any, obviously her parents are dead, hasn't seen her brother. Maybe she'll see your brother in this comic at some point. Hint, hint. I don't know. I'm just taking a stab at it. It'd be dark if she kills her brother. That'd be a real dark comic. But you know, what is it like to really have these three women? Because they're all very powerful. They're all pretty strong in different ways. And this is sort of the A-team, dream team so far. And there's four other women we're about to talk about, I promise. But they're all clashing to some degree for struggle of power, leading, but they all have allegiance to finding this chief.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is that like? Because these three women and the other four we're going to talk about are also about to face more or less hell.
Whew. Man, that is, like I said, that's the most challenging part, even above writing the story, because there's plenty of story. I took a lot from history, and like I said, I mixed it in there, and you can kind of find certain plots and things to be like, oh, you know, yeah, that did happen in history, or that particular thing. But making these women work together, and like you said, not overstepping each other's boundaries. So some women, I had to pick some of their less prominent qualities to make them not step over each other. And some women, when I read about them, you really may not find too many qualities, but I would pick something that kind of was close to a quality, and I added it in there.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because what I've read, and we're going to get into some inside baseball in a second here. Obviously, after we deal with before other women, I'm an equal offender. I'm just letting everybody know. It's divided by 7. This, but even that, where you're also finding the balance and figuring out where people shine. You know, those who know, I haven't written a comic yet. I'm not about to enter that fray. The comic that I do write, you know, I have an idea, and you're all going to hate me, not because it's a bad comic, but because you didn't think of it first. I have a project. It's not a secret that's coming out. That's comic related, but it's not a comic. It's going to be dropping in the next 7 days, give or take. But it's very interesting to figure out that balance. And then obviously there's 4 other women that are thrown into this, with Femi, who's who knows medical knowledge and is also coming from a place that worships, you know, Anton. I think Atan was the sun god, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm doing better. I'm doing better than expected right now. I'm doing better than expected. It also helps that I have this in front of me on my notes. She's very much, and I think this character is known as the Lady of Two Lands, because while she's masterful with medical stuff, she also knows how to wield a sword. And the first parallel, I'm obviously drawn to this character. I am a huge Naruto fan, and this is Sakura. It's pure Sakura from Naruto, this character. In personality and in traits is how I view it. And there's a lot of stuff going on with her, and she was inspired by Queen Nefertiti. And I think everybody. Yes. My name pronunciation. I admit defeat. I'm completely upfront about the fact that I don't know how to pronounce any of these names. I'm completely upfront. I understand where I stand on this. And so what was this like, really creating her and building her out? Because she's the medic in the group, but she's also, when you go into, you know, medical people, if somebody knows how to stop you from dying, they also know how to kill you more effectively, just by logic. And it's a very interesting character, her. And this is the character that I'm sort of drawn to the most, because I think there's so much that could be played off with her going forth. And what was this like, really building her out? Because I find this character to be the most interesting. Also, I'm familiar with this character's basis as well.
Right. So she is the smallest out of the group. And so she kind of feels like, I wanted her to feel like she's just as powerful as the biggest one in the group. So being a tracker, like you say, and a medical expert, there's all this hidden knowledge that she knows. She knows knowledge of a tracker, knows knowledge of the land, knowledge of all the probably like animals and different type of things. And so that's what she is, as well as the medical knowledge. And like you said, the downside of it is she knows that knowledge of knowing how to kill you, whether medically or by the land. Um, so she was actually fun. I actually had to, I reverse engineered her. I started with her story because I was trying to come up with her, and I started with her story, and then everything else started to fall in place. Um,
Because
so,
one of the things about this book that's sort of different than other books. Actually, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a few things in a comic book. A comic book can be, it's the setting and it's the environment, and that moving parts and characters can come in and out, and they're the moving gears. Or you have a book like you can't have Batman without Batman in the book.
right.
You could have an issue without Batman in the book. You could have 3 issues without Batman in the book. But Batman or Detective Comics doesn't work without Batman in it in some capacity, on screen or off screen, the presence of Batman. If you're having the next finding Batman and that's a 6-issue arc, that's fine, that works. But the idea is that, and then there's other books that, I'm watching Oz, the HBO series right now, or Law and Order SVU is a good example of this, where technically speaking, you could take out every single one of the characters and reboot that entire thing with an extremely similar presence, or remove 90% of the gears that work in that show. Captain Olivia Benson as the main, have a bunch of new detectives, and then just continue the show as a 50% or 75% reboot, because SVU is very much a setting type show and the characters are the gears. Your book is more the characters are the book versus the setting, where technically speaking, you'd have to change names, but I think you can slightly change their names and modernize them and still have the same personalities. And then you can easily change the setting more easily than these characters, I feel. And it's a very character-centric book. And so when you're building out these characters and you're reverse engineering them, what is that like? Because that's how I read the first 6 pages, is that I instantly got that I'm not reading this because it's taking place in Africa. I'm reading it because I'm trying to rescue their, person that they care about, the person who is, because you could put this in a feudal samurai setting and it could be transformed to their daimyo or their lord versus their tribal chief. And you'd have to make a few modifications, but it would be a very similar story. It would be the exact same story in my view. And so when you're reverse engineering it, because I'm coming for the character, I'm not coming for the setting. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I actually took a Netflix workshop, and they taught about character driven versus plot driven stories. And then that's what you're seeing on this. After I took that workshop and I understood, now I go through a list of things, especially in character building. I do like 6 or 7 questions. And I go through, who are the characters? What do they want? Why do they want it? How do they go about getting it? What stops them? And what are the consequences? And some of those questions require internal conflict and external conflict in building those. But like you said, with the plot driven, you can pretty much pull characters in, stick them out, and keep going with the same plot.
It's also, and then there's 2 more things that are done. So I'm working on a concept where it's a world versus even a plot, where I'm more interested in building out the world than anything else, because I want to sell the world. And that's a different thing. Or there's a theme concept that's being presented. I just watched an anime called Odd Taxi. That definitely is character, plot, and there's a theme. And everything is working collectively, but it's more the theme of what they're trying to do is what's driving it versus everything else, and everything else falls into the theme. and it's a very different concept. But that's like a next level workshop stuff. Or world creating is also a different concept. When somebody says, "Look, I'm going to go build out my next 50 stories over the next 30 years in this world," that's a different concept too. You know, but that's advanced class.
Right.
Yeah. But I think it's very important that people understand that when you're coming into this story, that you're coming for these characters. You're not coming not to discount, you know, representation or anything like that, because I do believe in representation, and I like the fact that I am not as cultured as I should be. I'm the first person to say that. You know, I don't know as much about Africa or Asia or even Australia as I know about the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And I know a lot more about Japan than you know, Mexico or Canada for that point. But it's the idea that I do think, you know, not to discount, but this could be anywhere with these characters, and I find it so interesting. And then there's three others. Obviously, there's Masika, who's 18, who is, I think, the wife of the chief. I think, right?
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah. Hey, you know, remember, guys, don't hate the player, hate the game. I'm just saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. You know, if you couldn't get a wife back in the day and your chief took what was yours, well, you have options. I'm just saying, go become the other kingdom and kill the chief or exile. And, you know, I'm just saying, work on yourself first and then get what you want. I know this because I was not the chief in high school. And look at where I'm at now. I'm just saying, I get to choose. Just saying. And I'm being very selective. So obviously, all aside, she's sort of on the team because, well, she might want her husband back, or maybe she doesn't want her husband back, and maybe she wants him in exile. I don't know. It's a good question. And then there's also Makita, who, and I probably got the name wrong, Makita, I think, and she's 30. She's sort of a swordswoman who was sort of sacrificed to a snake and then killed the snake, I think, and I'm not exactly sure, but she was cursed, and then she wasn't cursed by like the serpent god, and so she's got some slithering to do. 10 points for Gryffindor on that one. And then there's Natombi, and pretty much, I mean, she's 28, and she was sort of married to stop a war, then she escaped with her son, and then she took refugee in the village, and I guess, you know, she feels grateful to being, you know, a refugee and being treated decently and protected in this village, and now she's also on the team as well.
Right.
And so, obviously, as we sort of stated, there's 7 strong females who are all coming from different walks of life, have different experiences. A lot of them are foreign, which is very interesting, where they're not born in the village or they haven't spent necessarily a lot of time in the village. And so they understand what's outside this village and what's sort of going on, because this chief is exiled, and now they're trying to go find this exiled chief, either to bring him back, protect him, start a new kingdom somewhere, or, you know, figure out how to rally around him and gain more power of some format, I guess. A lot of stuff's going on because there's a lot of bloodshed going on and vying for power. So, yeah. What like, and so what is even just the bigger conception? Because the story starts out this way, but this is sort of the entry gate into it in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so without giving too much of the future story, they are trying to retrieve their chief in order to move from being a village to a kingdom, because they know that they feel like they have great fighters and that they can build this military and not take over like the neighboring kingdom is trying to do just for the sake of power, but more so as to combat the forces like the neighboring kingdom.
Because this is very much a eat or be killed type world.
Right.
And it's very much that, you know, people are vying for power, they're vying for protection. Obviously,
Right.
villages and smaller kingdoms are fighting against bigger kingdoms, and there's probably a lot of betrayal. I mean, a bunch of these women have more or less sort of prostituted themselves out, have been sold into slavery, were prizes in wars, were spoils in wars that have been
Right.
fought, that some of the village won, and that, you know, other people lost, and that they've run away from other kingdoms into this area. And so this is a very bloodied up dark world, and there's this idea now where these women probably feel, saying, look, this is a safe place where I've been treated decently and that I've been protected, and that this is where I want to be. And then obviously each of these women, and I named a few of them, one of them wants to obviously liberate her home village. And so she has a vested interest in this kingdom growing, because upon growing, at some point there's going to be an expedition, hopefully, that will liberate her village or defeat a kingdom that has defeated her village or is encompassing it in. And then other, you know, women might want to get revenge on the people who killed their parents. And so it's very interesting, because we haven't really explored in the 6 pages that are available necessarily why a bunch of these women want to do what they're doing, but they all have a motive, and they also, I think, all understand that in order to get what they want, they also need to get what the other 6 want and get also what they all share, which is the chief back. And it's a very interesting book when you start diving into it. And then also there's another theme that I find so interesting, is the loyalty component to it. And I've seen it in Facebook groups, and I'm sure you've seen it, where there's a big question in comics right now, where there's factions, not in the fictional world, but in the real world, where people have loyalty to certain people that there are sides in comics, and there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of different factions growing up, and there's people calling out loyalty positions and saying, what does loyalty mean to you? And it's very interesting that you have a comic that tests that, and how these 7 women and a variety of other people are very loyal to this chief. And what is that like? Because that's a lost art right now, I feel, in which that I've gone through a loyalty crisis where certain people I feel have not been loyal to me, and I've had to let them go this year.
Right.
And it's a very interesting thing. So when I'm reading these pages and obviously diving deeper into it and kind of thinking where it's going, it is very, very interesting that you touch upon that. So what is that like, to really touch upon that theme? Because it cuts deep, and I think everybody can relate to it somehow.
Right. So, just first off, I like you said, I mean, you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to comment on it.
Sorry.
I wrote this. No. I wrote this based off of, I want to create a good story, and that's like the basis of it. I just want to create a good story, no other agendas, nothing else. And so,
you go broke, no worries. You're living in a cardboard box, no problem. Good story first, right?
exactly. Like Stan Lee said, you create something that you like, and there are other people out there that don't like it too. And that's what I
if you're a rational, normal person, okay, let me explain what I mean by this. If you like, you know, something super obscure that is beyond weird, then maybe not. But if you like candy corn, there's plenty of other people who like candy corn out there. Okay? There's plenty of people who love a big deathmatch wrestling fan. A bunch of people in wrestling don't like that. A bunch of people do. If you go create a deathmatch wrestling company, you're going to find your customer, and it's going to work out. If you go create some obscure, weird wrestling thing, it might not work out for you. But continue.
So, I also wanted to introduce themes, just different things that we come across as human beings in this story. And you see them all throughout different types of comics. And so the loyalty part was challenging, because people would say, if this person took me when I was younger, there's no loyalty. There's no question that loyalty would be a question. Um, but you find that in this comic, there's loyalty being put in place because there were people in history that actually were loyal in cases like that, in situations like that. And so, I wanted to make this very unique when it came to the loyalty, and not just loyalty. Not all of them are out there for loyalty, but like you said, some of them have underlying reasons of why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very clear. Certain women are way more upfront on their goals. And
Yeah.
their goals don't go against the main goal of getting back their chief or growing a kingdom. It's just that they want something in a side to it. And it's very interesting when you have characters who say, look, I want to go make a lot of money. So I'll give a great example. I have Mixum, right, as my sponsor. I don't think it's any secret. My goal is to bring Mixum money, and I want money too. Both of those goals can be achieved at the exact same time. One goal doesn't hurt the other. And I think that's what's interesting about this right now is that in your book is that these women have alternative goals, but they don't hurt the main goal of getting their chief back. And so it's very interesting when you have goals that don't go against, because a lot of times in books, you have a traitor in the group, and that traitor's goal is for betrayal. And I don't think that's where we're going here, unless maybe we are to some degree. But it doesn't seem like it up front, and it doesn't seem that way. So I'm not going to ruin too much. I'm not going to press too harder into that. But I also something that's very interesting. So I know very little about Africa minus the Mamluks and the Janissaries. That's as far as I know about. I find those two groups to be the most interesting things that have happened in Egypt and dealing with the Middle East. And super interesting. I wrote an entire thesis on it in a class called Slavery Throughout History. Really interesting class. Super, super interesting. We dealt with for like a 2-hour lecture, slavery in the Americas. We dealt all the way with like Athens, Greece, and the Mamluks and the Janissaries. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating, those two groups. But what is it like for you to be writing this comic? Because and I'm going to say this very nicely, you're Black. So I mean, I can't say it any other way. And it's the idea that you're almost representing in a lot of ways your heritage and where I'm presuming your ancestors came from. Unless I'm completely wrong, and correct me if I am, and I'll walk it back politely. But even doing representation and doing it correctly, and all jokes aside, what is that like for you? Because it is important that people who have cultural ties, whether it's direct, indirect, or 4 generations ago, or 10 generations ago, are actually saying, hey, we're doing this and we're sort of claiming our culture. I'm Jewish. It's clear that if I'm to write a comic about, Judaism and I'm reclaiming my culture, it's a little bit different than somebody who is an atheist writing it. Not saying an atheist can't write it, not saying somebody can't do something that isn't that way. That's the point of writing. But when it comes from, a place of somebody who has ties to a culture, it's very different than when it's coming away from that, I guess.
Right. Hold on, give me 1 second. Let me plug my charger in real quick.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time. We're live though, so no worries. Anything could happen live.
Okay. So, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to. I was interested in history, and I decided to write about African history. That's why I said in this book or in this series, you will find just all type of history throughout it. You'll find some Asian history, you'll find some European history, just like you may find in the Game of Thrones or something like that. But the world is kind of, this particular series about the Amazons is set in the fictional land of Umanaba, which means land of abundance. And So it was interesting. Um, it wasn't really about I was trying to learn anything about my roots or anything, but I just wanted to explore something other than writing an American story because that's what my other comics were about, writing American stories. So I wanted to go outside of America, and then not only that, I wanted to explore uh, fantasy, somewhat fantasy. Yeah.
And to even go further, because there's been other people, and you've liked stuff, and I think it's who's behind Royal House. His name is slipping me. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Roderick. Roderick.
Curtis, is it Curtis something?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's Roderick Curtis.
Yes, yes,
Or
yes,
Curtis.
yes. His name was slipping me. I post in this group all the time. The name just slipped me. And he does a lot of comics, sort of doing that. And I've been noticing a lot more, people doing comics that are outside the U.S. And it's very interesting. And I'm curious how you feel about this because there is a big movement of representation. And there's a big movement also away from the traditional comic and diving into things that normally would not be done and wouldn't have been done 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And then 10 years is me being very generous on that topic. 5 years is more reality. And why do you think that trend has shifted now? And people are saying, hey, I want to do a book about, someplace in Africa, or I want to do a place about, the sport of Dambe, or I want to do something about, the Philippines, or New Zealand, because I've seen stuff like that pop up, or even stuff about Australia or the Outback. And I'm starting to see a lot more stuff pop up like that, and that is a new phenomenon to me. Unless I've been blind, I could be ignorant on the topic. But in the last 3 years, and I've been obviously doing interviews now in a very high volume, I've seen a lot more in the last 2 years than I've ever seen before. Maybe I wasn't looking. And I could be wrong, and please correct me because I'm not the expert on it, but I'm just speaking from what I've experienced as an interviewer. And what do you think that it was always there? It's just getting more attention, or do you think that it's now becoming a lot more because it's easier to produce a comic than ever before? It's easier for distribution. There's real people now producing comics. A lot of people have paved the path for indie comics. Kickstarter is an actual viable tool where 5 years ago, nothing against Kickstarter, but Kickstarter sucked in a lot of ways.
Right.
I think it's safe to say that 2017, 2018, Kickstarter is not the 2021 Kickstarter. And so I'm curious how you feel about that because I am in the camp that I think that Kickstarter just got a lot better in the last 2 years, and it's been a more viable vehicle to make this type of stuff happen. Versus unless it's always been there and it's just I'm blind as a bat. And I'm curious your opinion on that. Because you're doing the comic stuff. I'm commenting on it and I'm doing the interview side of it. So I see things a little bit differently than other people who are closer to it.
Okay. It's a lot in what you just said. I'm gonna try to remember it all. I think first I've come across because I just started doing comics maybe 2 years ago, and I've come across some indie comics, and I'm like, well, is this a newer company? And when you actually research the company, they've been out for like 10 years or 5 years and different things like that. And so you have comics that have always been there, and then you have the new mix of Kickstarter kind of blowing up and being that option for a lot of creators because you said the availability of people like Mixem, Kickstarter, all of these other indie options help push the content out there where before it wasn't really a viable option.
Also, I'm just going to add, and then I'll let you add to it. It's also the fact that COVID shut everything down. And I'll be honest, when you're not going to the movies, you're not going to the bars, you're not going outside to your favorite restaurant, you're not going to play Frisbee in the park, and all of a sudden you're home, what's there? The internet still works. And now what starts happening is that If your only option for entertainment is via internet delivery, more things are seen just by nature. And so that's the other thing too, that the last 22, 24 months have really pushed, is that more people have just been seeing and discovering a variety of projects and entities that maybe they wouldn't have seen because they would have been busy doing something else. And if you're on the internet for 6 hours every day, during COVID, you were probably on the internet for at least 10. And that means that's a 40% increase of you being on the internet, which means that you seeing something is 40% more likely, or 4 times more likely, or however we do the math. I'm not good at math, guys. But sorry for interrupting. I felt that that's very important to also add into that. So please continue.
I highly agree with that. It allowed people to actually sit down and write too. Sit down and think about something that they had on their mind, but they didn't quite have time because they either were always working or something like that. So now they had plenty of time to sit at home and really work on the comic and go for the Kickstarter and things like that.
Or my favorite thing is that, so I'm starting a job hopefully next week, and I don't have to commute to it. So that means that it would take me about 40 minutes to commute back and forth. That's not bad.
Right.
It's like 20 minutes away on a bad day, back and forth. Not bad. That's a good commute. When I was in DC, and I used to live in DC, my commute would be like an hour and a half both ways. Now, if you have an extra hour and a half every single day, and you're not commuting, and you're in your house, and you're single, or you're with your girlfriend or your wife, and maybe you don't have a kid, or maybe you do have a kid, if you have an extra hour and a half, 2 hours, you can get a lot done in those 2 hours. Where you could write, if you're a good writer, or you're a decent writer, or you suck even, you can get something, you can get a page done in 2 hours. And now in a month, maybe you could get 20 pages done. And if you were going and driving, well, maybe you could type while you're driving, but I don't want to be behind you or in front of you for that matter. But I think the point, or even if you're on a metro, even the idea that if you now have an extra hour and a half or 2 hours every single day, you get a lot done. So I think that's a part of it too. I also think that there's a demand for this because people are sick of the old shit, for lack of a better word. And I think people are saying, look, I am bored with the same Batman, Superman, Captain America, Spider-Man, and Iron Man stories that are coming out. And this seems interesting because I don't know anything about African queens, and well, I'm going to learn something about them, and this just seems like a fun adventure. And I also think people say, look, I want heroes and I want books that I look like. We in society gravitate to things that we are familiar with or things that we think are cool. So kids are gravitating towards Miles Morales because he speaks like them. He acts like them. He's exposed to social media and text messaging like he is. It's the idea that, there's a gravitation towards that character because it operates a certain way. I am gravitated towards certain characters because they act a certain way. I'm now becoming older. I am definitely more gravitated towards older characters and not younger ones, which makes sense.
Right.
So that's how I view it, at the very least.
Yeah, I was going to tap on that, because I've heard people talk about, Marvel and DC, and like you said, sometimes they get tired of the same old thing, and all of this changing characters when they weren't that in the book, and so you hear a lot of those different things, and I try not to listen to any of it because I said I don't want to taint my focus on my story or become unfocused and bring that into my story. So that's why sometimes when you were asking me some of the questions, I'm like, I don't know. I haven't heard about any of those stories or any of the group of people, but I do think, like you said, they want something different. And the fact that we're bombarded with so much content too, it's like it almost feels like sometimes you're seeing the same old thing over and over. it wrapped in a different wrapper. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm sure we're going to dive into this in 1 second, and we're going to talk about some inside baseball in a second here. But before we do, I do need to mention my friends over at Lone Wolf Comics. They have an amazing Kickstarter running right now with Snowpaw. Snowpaw is going to be funding. I mean, their goal was like 10,000. They're going to break that. And Snowpaw takes place in 19th century Scotland, where a fierce heroine with an adventurous spirit nearly gives in to the social expectations of her time, but a trite fairy tale ending is not to be, as Shirella McKinley discovers her werewolf lineage and her eyes are open to the existence of supernatural beings and creatures of fantasy. And Shirella McKinley is Snowpaw. And it's live right now on Kickstarter from the creative team of Robert A. Moltari, who's going to be on next week with Mog Parks. Park is on that. Bruna Costa is also involved. Dave Lenz, who's an amazing letterer. If you could get Dave Lenz as your letterer, I'm just saying, do it. And Katrina Rotes. And you could actually join the Wolfpack by backing the Kickstarter today at lonewolfcomics.com/snowpaw. I'm about to put it in the comments for everybody right here. It's coming up for you right there, so you can back it right there. It's also in the banner right now for as hopefully it will go right now as it's going across the bottom of the screen. And I'm super stoked because Rob is one of those guys and his team is a phenomenal team. And this is one of those books that you want to back. The stretch goals look great on it, and his packages are phenomenal. And so I recommend everybody backing it. It's going to exceed 10,000, but we want to go to the moon with it, guys, because the more it is backed and the higher it goes, the better the product is going to be. And he's also giving you table prices with his Kickstarter, which is phenomenal. So please go back that. It's an amazing project. And now back to you, because I definitely want to talk about Inside Baseball with you, because you also have a great project as well. And so I definitely want to talk about Inside Baseball with you, because you got a lot going on with your project. And obviously your Kickstarter is also funded right now. And I mentioned it off the top of it. And you set the goal for $500. I'm going to be setting my Kickstarter very similar to yours. But $500 doesn't fund a comic, now does it?
No.
Right. and I'm asking this.
I wish it did.
The reason why I'm asking this before anybody gets on my case or your case on this one is you openly have said it in the Kickstarter that you need $2,700 to fund and fully fund Chapter 1. You have 6 pages done, and so what is going on right now with it, and why'd you set the goal low, and obviously how are you configuring that out? Because it is very interesting and it is tricky to figure out, okay, how do I determine what goal I need? What am I thinking I'm going to do on this goal? And what is sort of the sweet spot? Because it is a big problem in Kickstarter. Obviously, I need more than $500 for my Kickstarter, but I also understand that, it's tricky figuring it out. Right. And I had some experiences with Kickstarter and all that stuff. So what is the whole mentality behind this? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this, and I don't think it's an easy thing to figure out.
Yeah, so like you said, the first thing you want to do is pre-plan everything that you, at least try to pre-plan everything or most of the things that you want to have in your Kickstarter. The cost of your comic because the art you're paying for your pages, any rewards, you include that in there, and that should be all in the pledge amount. Now, I set my pledge amount at $500 so I can easily attain the amount instead of going 30 days and then I don't reach 2,700 and it's like a waste of time.
So at least let's talk about that, because I love breaking Kickstarter. I want to break Kickstarter. There's no question about it. I want to break it. I don't think people understand when I say that. I don't want to destroy Kickstarter, but the saying is you need to know the rules to break it. I'm a big new school art guy. I love new school tattooing. It's new school, for those who don't know. The idea is that you take something and you outproportion every component, stretching how far you can go without you're pushing and you're slightly breaking rules. So a girl might have gigantic boobs, a thin waist, and hips that can cock like a machine gun shooting. Okay, and I use that. Steph Wilson is a new school artist, whether he likes me saying it or not. That's up to him to decide. There's a few other new school artists as well that are out there. But it's the idea that this is so when you set your goal for $500, you're obviously funded, and it doesn't become a waste of time. But how does that factor into the goals of the backer? And that's where it gets tricky, because obviously a lot of people on Kickstarter make their money not on Kickstarter. I could tell you for a fact that the money I will make with my podcast, in particular with one goal, I will make more money from that one goal in season 4 if it's bought than I will in the entirety of season 3. Because I understand what certain things are worth. Not to mention that there's a good chance that if I actually run this thing successful, because I'm funding this show for those who are interested, I might get invited to cons to speak about this. I might get invited to podcast cons because I might be one of the only successful Kickstarters that's podcasted out there. And if I have a 600% funded podcast on Kickstarter, I think it's going to be noticed very, very effectively. And I might get invited to talk about it. I might get paid a good amount of money for it because, well, I figured out how to do it. So the point I'm trying to make is that I'm curious how this affects the backers and where the real battle plan, because I know you said you're interested in story, but we all understand that you need more than $500 to do this, and well, you want to make money for your time.
Right. So, with me, this only applies to me. I know that I'm gonna get the comic created, and so basically this money is going toward helping cut down costs, but also it will fund the backers as well, because otherwise, like I said, I would have paid the whole 27 out of my pocket, and it would have taken even longer to finish.
So sorry to interrupt, because this is where it gets really interesting, in my opinion. And I think I'm gonna ask you something, and I don't mean to be rude interrupting you.
No.
Is that there's a few theories in Kickstarter right now, I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's a theory that says, look, I'm going to go publish this book regardless. It's a matter of now I want to go, and I got the 2,700. This book is going to get funded regardless. It's not an issue of, if, it's an issue of when. And that I'm taking an indie comic route, and Kickstarter's goal is that, well, I'm going to recoup some of my losses, or that I'm cash flowing it. And if my Kickstarter meets halfway and I have, $1,250 on my Kickstarter as a goal, and then I'm paying the other $1,250, well, I'll recoup my position by selling directly to stores or cons or other things. And that's sort of the true essence of indie. There's the other side where people say, look, I'll outlay some money up front, but the Kickstarter, I need $6,000 because my artist cost me $2,500 or cost me $1,800. Let's roll it at $2,000 for this example. And my art cost me $2,000. I outlaid the $2,000. Then I pull that back in. It goes back into my fund, or I just kick it forward to issue 2, the $2,000 that we recoup first from the Kickstarter. Then the rest is printing, and then maybe, if I have 400 left, that goes into stretch goals. And then if we have 100 left, me and my co-creator, we go and we take our wives out to a nice dinner, and this covers half the dinner. Okay, that sometimes happens too, and that's the other school of thought. And so you seem to be in school of thought 1, which I thought was what Kickstarter was for originally. And correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, because that's just how I see it. Is that it's very interesting, and so I've seen both, and I've seen it done both ways. I've backed projects like Ozzy Longoria does it the way you're doing it, where he's like, this book is already printed. This Kickstarter is just distribution, and it helps to cut my costs down on this project. versus somebody like, I don't want to name names because I don't want them to get angry at me, but there's plenty of people who have done that as well. And so correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because you're in the industry. I am not. I am a podcaster. I've never touched a Kickstarter. I'm about to, and believe me, my head is killing me with writing copy. My head hurts from it. It hurts. It is hard. My copy is 3 paragraphs, guys. It hurts. But I'm curious your thoughts on all of that.
So, like you said, I originally thought Kickstarter was to help kickstart your invention or whatever you're trying to do. And if you make it, I think what's become a trend is the fully funded thing just blows out the door what you were really asking for. And so the other side of that are the people who either don't meet their goal or just barely go over their goal. And it's like, well, now we have to, it's really in the name. This was just a kickstart. And so that's what I'm experiencing right now, just a kickstart, but it's still going to get done.
And to even talk about that, because obviously, and we're talking real inside baseball, and we're going into controversial territory. There are more projects on Kickstarter than ever before. All this year, all last year too. What is there, like 260? I want to say right now, around that number, I think. And the question that I have is this sustainable? Because at a certain point, and I asked Isaac Fox this. And he said it's an entertainment problem, and I mean we were live, so I don't think he's gonna mind me saying it. But it's this idea is this sustainable, this growth, because there is a position where something goes too far, and that if you go to have too much, and then there's too many projects, and there's too many options, there's not gonna be enough money going around. Obviously I've tightened my budget. I only back 1 Kickstarter a month. I can't afford to back every single person's project for a lot of reasons. I have commitments. I'm fully funding an investment position. I have commitments by the end of the year to have a certain number of certain stocks in my portfolio for other reasons, and that they produce me a dividend rate of return that I have to meet, and that has to grow. And then if it misses its mark, I have to readjust by inserting new capital. It's a very complicated thing. That's why you don't see me going crazy on Kickstarter. And I see people backing like 900 projects, and I'm like, how do you have money? And then I ask them, what is their Roth looking like? What is their 401k looking like? What is their, SEP IRA looking like? I'm using these words, and I know when people watch this, they might be confused by what I'm stating. But I don't know, and I'm curious how you feel about all that. And the base of the question, I guess, before I wind up getting you and me both in trouble here, is, do you think Kickstarter is sustainable with this amount of projects on? Because there is, there's only so much money to go around, and at a certain point, people run out or money gets tighter. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I'm kind of like 50-50 on that, because I was telling my dad during the pandemic, I said, man, everybody's complaining about not having money, but when I'm out here doing Uber, the strip clubs are filled up, all these different places are filled up, but people don't have money, and money's being spent, and then people aren't really going back to work. And I'm like, well, so it's just a bunch of questions. But when I worked at Uber I actually worked for the corporation downtown, and I felt that they added too many drivers. And like you said, an overabundance of something, and then the drivers weren't really getting paid enough money.
Because this is how I feel, right? So I'll explain. Well, one of the things that's going on right now is that, cool, there's 10 people who I'm like, great, you guys all have Kickstarters, and all of your books are the same print number, and they're all $20. Now, you all have different artists. That's great. If somebody says I'm $18 on it, great, you just earned my business. Like, that's my problem, is that all these people on Kickstarter, they're asking similar prices across the board, but they're not being competitive price-wise when there's 15 options. Then I find a Kickstarter that I feel is producing a $15 book to sell it to me for $8. Where do you think I'm going with my money? Because it's not just an investment at this point saying, okay, you're being competitive. Or, you know, or you're selling me what I think is a $40 book for $25. Now you're being competitive. Or you're selling me a $20 book for $15. And this is where I'm at as a person at this point, is that when you have an abundance and there's 10, 20, 40, 50 comics out there and projects that are all in the same category, and there's no distinguishing factor because I'm not reading the story anyway, and you're all the same price, well, I got a problem. Because if you're all $20, I'll just go to Zenescope instead, and I'll go off Kickstarter. because you're the same competitive position, and with Zenescope, I get reward points. I might not get stretch goals, but half the stretch goals I get, they're not that great anyway.
Right.
So I mean, that's how I feel, and I think that leads to the point. And I think that's why I'm having issues now a lot with Kickstarter and the sustainability. And as a backer, and I'm about to drop, and I'm obviously in a sector where podcasting, you know, if you do $1,500 on podcasts on Kickstarter, that's like the top upper echelon. And if I market it correctly, I'm going to be fine, and I'm going to break that easily. But I am really curious how you feel about all that, because what I just stated is not what people agree with me. People disagree with me a lot on this very issue.
The very issue of not having enough, or it's not sustainable over time.
Yeah. It's not sustainable economically, and because there's an abundance of projects. And then mainstream is just as attractive as Kickstarter in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I get called out as a pariah on it. I really do. And if you go in enough Facebook groups, when I talk like this, I get eaten alive. But I don't think I'm wrong. I don't.
Right. Yeah, no, I believe those issues that you stated are valid. Like you said, I've ran into some people who back everything, and that's a tough one, you know, because when I do go on Kickstarter, I'll see a lot of the, you know, and Kickstarter shows you a lot of the comics that you see when you open up Kickstarter, they're like thousands of dollars funded. And you're like, man, is everybody making thousands of dollars? And you really have to go search for the ones that aren't making like so much money.
It's also with the $1,000, and feel free to disagree with me. I look at comics that are doing like 15, 20,000, and I'm saying to myself, are they even making money? Because the saying is more money, more problems. My overhead my Kickstarter is, the story is what needs to be written. The rewards are written really, really well. My overhead is pennies on what it costs me to produce a reward. Now, that's because everything I'm doing is digital except for the big reward, which, you know, I'm not going to talk about because once I drop it, everybody's going to steal it. Because it hasn't been done yet. It hasn't been done yet. And everybody's going to be like, I'm surprised I didn't think of that. It's a simple reward, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant, and I don't know how I thought of it, but it hasn't been done yet. And I've looked, and nobody's done anything close to it. It's an ultimate marketing play. But my point is that I question how much people are actually making on a $30,000 Kickstarter, especially when you have 20 covers that you have to produce. Because producing, and I'm sure you know this, every time you produce a new cover, it is another cost. It's like another $250 plus printing to produce it, plus art. It's not, you know, cheap. I mean, you're paying for plating, you're paying for a lot of stuff. And so it's not just, you know, another cover is free. It's expensive. And, you know, I wonder how much this stuff costs. And I also wonder how much debt people carry. And it's also opportunity cost. Because if you have to pay all your artists up front, and let's say that you have a $30,000 Kickstarter and you had to pay, $4,000 up front, and that this thing takes 6 months and then you recoup your money and it takes you a whole year to recoup your money, how much interest in other segments could you have made on that $4,000?
Mm-hmm.
Just to give everybody an idea, this is a fun math assignment. So AT&T is a little under $26. They produce a 52-cent dividend every single quarter. So take $4,000, divide that by 26, times that by 52, times that by 4, or times, whatever $4,000 divided by 26 is, that number times $2.08. And then see, when you look at it, plus, and then the way you calculate all this is that, and this is the simple version, it gets a little more complicated in 1 second, but this is how you actually calculate value. And this is my issue on Kickstarter right now, very much. And this is the investing side of me, is that, and you're an entrepreneur, so you know exactly where I'm going with this, right? Is that you then say, okay, the equity, it's the equity plus the dividend. And then if you put it is what that is valued at the same year length end, and does that exceed the value of what I produced and what I put in? Because if you produce a comic, it's your printing costs, your artist cost, and then you have to assume also the opportunity cost, which you could value at however you want to value it at. Also the fact that it's not liquid, and also it's how much is that debt going to be held for? Meaning, how much is it you're going to be holding on to these books until you get rid of them, and assuming you get rid of them at full price, and after your credit card process fee of 3%, or going to a con, and how much it costs you to actually sell a book, because selling a book is not just printing it, it's art and a variety of stuff. I mean, I could tell you that if your print costs $13.87 and your art was $3.50, and printing is if it costs you $30.87 with art and printing, and you printed 250 copies, I think it's like what, $5.88.
Right.
That is how much it costs per book to sell, and that's assuming you sell and there's no fees attached to that. If you have a 13% big fee on that, it's going to cost more, where you have to add 13%, and then if you go to a con, your con table is $250. You need to factor that into how many books you sold onto that number of $5.88. I'm really good at this.
Right.
This is my wheelhouse, and I understand how much every single book costs. If I'm brought into a project, that's the first thing we're going to talk about before anybody ever talks about anything else, because I operate as a COO. I do not operate as a writer or an artist. I market as a marketer, and that's, but that's enough about me pontificating. This is definitely the clip I'm cutting out. This is definitely the clip I'm cutting out and putting up on Instagram. Undeniably. The first hour, the second hour of us doing this, from the hour mark to about 8 minutes in, is me talking about money. But that's my biggest issue with Kickstarter right now, and even with Kickstarter is that most people don't make money in comics because it's extremely hard.
Right. Hey, and you know what, that it's funny that you say that, because I actually, going into this, my purpose was creating content to sell, not to make money off comics. The comics are the vehicle to get me there, but it was to sell to in the movies, toys and other things like that. And the story is already there. And if I do end up making a lot off of it, then so be it. But it was all the other IP options.
See, I'm the exact opposite. My whole point of this show is that I understand, and look, it's taken me 8 years to get to this point, but I came into this entire thing with the sole purpose of making money. And even with comic books and a variety of other stuff, where my business is now working. I mean, I have a sponsor. I'm doing live reads. It's not a secret. I get paid for that. And I'm not saying I'm becoming a millionaire overnight, but I'm now starting to make money. It took me 8 years to get here, but this was the entire purpose 8 years ago. It's to make money, and now it's starting to happen. and there is real opportunity. And I mean, it's crazy when you start diving into this, how you can make money and where it's going. And a lot of also where I'm going is that I'm pumping all the money I'm making from this stuff right back into the show. So I'm not concerned about this because I'm thinking long term. Is that it's very interesting, and I think a lot of creators. And I'm curious how you feel about this because we're really diving into inside baseball here. And I promise we'll get into rewards soon. I promise. I'm going to sell your book in a lot of ways. I'm going to try to get you at least another $100 after I push this all out. And get you at least another $100 to help you get funded. That's the goal. I'm going to try to help you get there. But where I feel like a lot of creators don't come in with a business mindset. You obviously, we spoke on the last time that you've done some entrepreneur stuff. You figured out how to do stuff. You obviously run some side hustles and some other businesses and ventured out into that. And I think a lot of creators are creators first. They are, I think this is how it goes, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's you are a reader, then you say, maybe I can do this. Then you start doing it, and then you figure out the business secondary or thirdary or fourth terry. And obviously, I think you might have come in a little bit different where you had an idea saying, look, I sort of understand this is a business. I've come into this space very much like it's a business. I sell a lot of comics every year. I buy a lot of comics. I flip comics. I sell a comic, and then I buy it back raw for a fraction of what I sold it for. I am doing that tomorrow, which is kind of crazy. And then I get it regraded, and then I sell it again for the same price, which means that I don't double my money, I quadruple my money. And so how do you feel about comic creators and even just the business and how people don't understand that comics are a business? And because I think that's one of the flaws in the entire comic world right now is that people don't come in with the business mindset of saying, this is my product. It's not my creation anymore. It's a product. And I think it's complicated. And my favorite question to ask to people, and I'm going to ask it to you afterwards, you answer this question because I'm curious about this, but I think it's going to highlight sort of this question.
So
I'm throwing hardballs at you, man.
No. I always try to figure out how to exactly answer these questions because I know what I want to say. So basically, I would say the way that I think people always got to play to their strength. And see, my strength is not a creator first. Well, not a comic creator first. I'm a creator, but not a comic creator. And I'm a business creator, and I've been learning to do comics. And so, like you said, I approached it with, I want to create, and I understand this is a business, but I understand the opportunities around this, what I'm about to do. So it's not just a comic book to me. It's more than a comic book. It's almost like a wheelhouse and, sectioned up into different portions. Almost like I think about it when I'm doing pitch decks and they ask you, what's your value proposition and show me the graphs and what's your market. And so my mind is always working like that. And it can sometimes clash with me creating stories because I can get jumbled up and it can get in the way of me being creative on this side. And I have to put the business aside for a while. Now, you said a lot of people creators who are creator minded first may not exactly see the whole picture. Like you said, if you're treating it like a business, I'm seeing the whole picture, and that kind of even helps me form some of my stories. Just like the Conquered Crowns, it's not just about the Amazons, but it's a story. Conquered Crowns is something you can take out the title Amazon and put title in there, or put whatever in there.
Who Sean Keenan is by any chance?
Who? Sean Keenan?
Sean Keenan.
It sounds familiar.
XTC.
Is he off of Facebook?
What'd you say?
Is he off of Facebook? It sounds like I've seen that
Yeah,
name before.
he does XTC Monsters, Extreme Tournament
Yeah,
Championship Monsters, Extreme
right,
Tournament Championship Monsters, and he's basically done that where they've
right,
sort of created the brand title, and then they go and insert other things into it. And
right.
obviously, when I build a serious comic, because I'm not going to be building a serious comic, I have a funny comic that I want to write first. I think I'm going to do it in March. It's going to take me like a week to do it too. So that should give an idea of what it's going to look like. And then you're all going to hate me for it, and you're all going to love me too. It's brilliant what I'm going to do. It's brilliant what I'm going to do. It's going to, if marketed correctly, it will buy me a house because it's
Right.
pure brilliance of what I'm going to do. It's a really, really great idea because nobody thinks about anything. It's a comedic idea too. I'm going to pull the Orange Cassidy in the comic world. Let's put it that way. That should give everybody an idea of what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it in sunglasses. And I got the haircut sort of down. So, but where I'm going with that is obviously, you know, I think that I operate as a COO. I don't operate as a creator. I'm very creative in how to structure business deals. I'm very creative in understanding what people want. I'm very creative in doing this venture, but I'm now understanding how it all works from a business. I'm also understanding what my bottom line is, and I'm also understanding what intellectual property is. My logo is worth a decent amount of money. I have a T-shirt that I bought. I haven't made any money on it, but I own it. I understand intellectual property. I also understand what my name is worth. Pop Anime Comics is worth money because it's been around for 8 years. It's a website. It's a Facebook page. It's a big distribution channel. There's a million things out there with Pop Anime Comics, and it's a recognizable, catchy name. And it's very important to understand that it also has other byproducts like Pop Anime Comics Lounge. And I could spin anything off I want on it, and I understand what the real value in this business is. You know, it's not necessarily Conversations in Pop Culture, which is a derivative owned by Pop Anime Comics. And adding value. Pop Anime Comics itself as the parent company, more or less, has made no money. This is making money now, which means in essence, Pop Anime Comics is a holding company essentially, and a company by itself, and it's super interesting in that realm. And so the question I'm curious about, and this is a hypothetical, but if I said to you right now, and I'm going to throw it out to you, I'm going to give you like 10 seconds to answer, and it's a yes or no answer because I think it's going to highlight something. And me and Roger Curtis were speaking about it a little while ago, maybe 6 months ago. Is if I give you $50,000 for Conquered Crowns outright purchase, yes or no?
No.
But you know where the question is going, right?
Yeah.
Where's the question?
I believe so.
No. Where is my question going? Because if you know where my question's going, you'll understand exactly where I'm going. So explain where I'm going, because I think it's important that the creators hear this and other people hear it.
So the brand that you're creating and the value of your brand, if your brand has good value, that's the first thing, because
that's part of it.
Yeah, people will create a lot of things and it may not have a great actual brand, but
also the second part of where I'm going is the idea of saying at a certain point, you know, you have to understand when to sell an idea. If you're a business, there's a point where you have to understand, I am selling this idea today because I know that this is the greatest exit and I need to be healthy for the business. If somebody offered, you know, me a certain amount of money for Pop Anime Comics, you know, there's going to be a point where I can't refuse that offer because it's what's good for the business. Or if they wanted to buy a piece of something out of the business, you know, and they said, hey, I want to buy Conversations in Pop Culture and I want to incorporate it into, you know, Spotify, and I want to buy it outright for $2 million, you know, it might be healthy for the overall business. And that's the thing where it gets very tricky. And if you're a business, versus a creator. And this is the question I ask now to creators, is saying, if I offer you X, would you sell? And somebody says, well, not for that amount of money. But if they say not for that amount of money, but I'm interested in selling, I might consider selling, but it has to be the right deal. Then that's when somebody's in business versus that's when they're a creator. And that's in my opinion, the ultimate test. It doesn't mean you don't believe in your product. If I sold Conversations in Pop Culture for $3 million, it's I believe in the product. I just understand that that's an extremely high valuation, and that somebody can take it further once the library, or I built something successful and I made a nice exit on it. It's very important to ask those questions, I feel, and I feel more creators need to be asked those questions because you know exactly where you are. And the reason why I only gave you 10 seconds to answer is, it's not a 10-second question. It's a little unfair for me to throw it to you, but it's very important, I feel, that people need to understand that position versus what a business first creation. So, it's a super interesting thing. And you could disagree with how that's approached. I am totally fine with people disagreeing with me on that as well. I understand I might be the black sheep here in the comic community because I come out from a very different world than everybody else does.
Well, it's good that people don't always have the same view and the same outlook. And that's what creates conversation, meaningful conversation sometimes. And that's where people learn. No, I like you said, I do agree. You approach every offer, every situation, every opportunity differently. And you try to approach it with some wisdom. And if you don't have that, then you get somebody that can help you. So, and there are plenty of people out there. Yeah.
No, I agree. And now, I definitely want to back at controversial situations, and I want to talk about your, rewards and all that stuff that's going on, because you got a bunch of stuff happening right now. And so obviously I do want to talk about some of the stuff that's out there. So first and foremost, I think this is the cover A that's out there. And I think you're offering it digital. You're also offering it in a physical component. And so obviously we got the 7 women on it. We got a really cool elephant. Obviously it looks like a really, really cool cover. I don't think there's a cover B, right? There's just the straight up cover.
It's in the works.
Oh, so it's in the works. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. And it's just going to be that one cover because I was super excited about it. And I said, okay, I'll do a cover B. Because I wanted it.
Fair enough. and then also there are some posters as well. And so that's cool. And so obviously posters are always fun. And so what is the story behind posters? Because posters are different than prints. Prints are different than posters. Posters are sort of fun because, people hang up posters. And it's also something that's just slightly different in the entire realm of what's usually done in comics.
Yeah, so, with the posters, I love hanging posters on my wall, and those posters look pretty cool. And so I know that I can get them. When you get them in abundance, it's not like a lot of money. Like you said, it's just the same way with the prints too. You get 11 by 17 prints for cheap, and so
prints are pretty cheap. Producing prints are not that expensive. In bulk, it's not that expensive. I know exactly how much a print costs to produce. I know it down to the T. I've never produced one, and I know it down to the T because in bulk, prints can be more of a money maker than a comic book can at a convention.
Right. Yeah.
Also, some people are not fans of comics, and depending on the artist and who the artist is, print can be sell out crazy. There are artists who make bank with prints, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it. And just looking at my dog, she's gonna bark. It's told you. I knew it from the start. I knew it right from the start. I was just waiting for her to do it. She's probably gonna do it again.
Get it out the way.
and I'm just letting everybody know that that's what she's gonna do. She sees her reflection. She hears her friend out there. She wants to say hello, and so it's okay, Hopi. You did nothing wrong. It's okay, Hopi. But it's also even going further. You have a very cool journal, and it's a manga journal that's out there, and that's a cool one too. And you can see my door slightly going out because my dog apparently needs to do her business. But going back to the manga journal, so what's the story behind this? Because this is kind of cool.
So the story behind that is giving you a little extra of the known world that you see on the map on the Kickstarter. The map on the Kickstarter shows you just a little piece of the land of Uwanaba, and this book details or gives more of a history, untold history of that shown land and the people and animals and different things like that.
And I kind of like it because it's a little bit different, and I like different rewards. And even talking about that, what is that like for you to present different rewards and different components and doing things that are slightly different? Because everybody does prints and does a cover A and does a cover B and a C, D, E, F, G. Everybody does shirts to some degree, which I'm going to show in 1 second here. Obviously, these are the shirts. You know, nothing against your shirts, but everybody does shirts. And offering just something slightly different, you know, because it's nice to have options. You know, I appreciate when there's something like coasters in a Kickstarter, or there's, you know, something that normally wouldn't happen. You know, that like a really cool bottle opener, right? Like that stuff's cool to me. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's cool. So what's the idea behind that, all that, and also offering something that's just unique?
Exactly what you just said. I am trying to find out what makes a successful Kickstarter. Not necessarily what makes a successful Kickstarter, but what other successful Kickstarters are doing. And so you take a look at some of that, and some stuff I do, well, some stuff all creators do borrow. Like you said, people making shirts, pens, pencils, all that stuff, posters, print. And I wanted to go with something, like you said, different. And I try to do that with every Kickstarter. And I'm taking a look at my rewards now.
You have some other stuff too. You have like a big, sort of box that a bunch of other people have done, and that's a thing that has a lot of like extra goodies in it. And we're going to leave that a mystery because it's not necessarily a mystery box, because some stuff is disclosed in it. And I think everything that's sort of in the other tiers is in there. And then there's some other stuff that is sort of a mystery, but you're also getting a really cool piece of art in that box, and it's printed. And obviously, I don't know how many people know about me, but I'm a huge Zenoscope fan, and they have Zen boxes. And I really appreciate Zen boxes where there's 2 comics in there, usually a regular cover of something that's sort of limited to 200, and then a metal that's limited to 200, maybe some metal cards, maybe a treat, maybe some patches, maybe a little minifig, stuff like that. And it's kind of like a loot box. But there's a bunch of stuff that are themed to Zenoscope in there. And I just make really good money on that stuff. And I have a feeling I know exactly what's in it. I'm making the prediction that it's going to be Wendy's as the book, and it's going to be the Wizard of Oz metal version of Cyberpunk Dorothy. I'm making the prediction now. Hopefully I'm right. I'm just calling it like I see it. But obviously, even offering something that's different like this is very cool in that regard. And I think it's just nice when Kickstarters go and say, hey, we're going to go mix it up and do something that hasn't been done before, because it at least gets me to read your Kickstarter. It gets me to read,
Right.
I'm still listening. I'm just going to shut the door because it's cold.
Oh, no.
But I'm listening, everybody. I'm moving with you. We have motion in this Kickstarter, but you can answer the question.
So, I think the journal was something that it was, like I said, a lot of this stuff is more so my favorite stuff. as opposed to me thinking about the actual customer first. It was more so I would like to see a journal of this stuff, and I think they would too. So, um, and then I made two tiers for retailers,
Oh, we're
and
going to talk
I
about
say
that.
that because
Talk about that
okay,
because
okay,
obviously I've now entered that stage, and I
right,
am, and so. Sorry, there's chaotic stuff going on in my house with my dog, and
mm-hmm,
she's fine. So even talking about retailers,
mm-hmm,
one of the things that I've entered that stage, and I'm learning a very valuable lesson. It's not the person's fault who I bought off Kickstarter. They did nothing wrong. It's just a tough space to be involved in. And one of the things that I'm learning is that I'm an eBay seller, so I understand my path to selling indie comics is different than a traditional brick and mortar store's
mm-hmm,
path because people don't walk in. I have to drive traffic to my store. But at the same
right,
time, I also understand that if I have $75 or I have $50 or I have $40 and I can qualify, I'm more than happy to buy because, well, at some point I'll sell that merch somewhere or another. It could very well be that in 5 years I'm opening up a comic shop or I'm opening up a pop-up shop or something like that, or I go to a con just unload a bunch of stuff. I'm not concerned when I have the money to do it. I know that
right,
you're not against non-retailers like me or traditional retailers from buying your book to sell, as well as the traditional position. And what is that like to opening up to both? Because there's a bunch of people like me out there now that are saying, hey, look, I'm going to buy 2, 3 Zen boxes from Zenoscope and I'm going to sell it out because
right,
I do that. I buy and flip books. I make a decent amount of money doing it. I'm not getting rich off of it, but it's a nice side hustle. When you're selling $300-$400 a month in comics with very little work, and then you're buying more comics, and then you're pulling some money out, and then I can get into the indie game for relatively cheap prices. It's nice when certain people allow me to do it too, because I don't know what's going to be hot, and maybe I'll hit a home run every once in a while with a book
mm-hmm,
that just takes off out of nowhere because it's happened before.
right.
So I'm
So
curious about all that and even selling to non-retailers and also taking care of retail because distribution is a bitch. Hands down, getting into comic stores is difficult. It is
right,
an extremely difficult thing. It is hard to hit it the right way. A lot of retailers won't take indie books or they want such a discount that it makes no sense economically, or you have to almost go local, and then inch out, and then you might have to do a bunch of signings, and it's complicated, especially because, and also understanding you even should be in distribution in comic shops as well.
right.
But that's the other question. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you.
Yeah. So I'll start with the retail first. With the retail, I didn't really understand that whole monster, and I got in a friend's liquor store. Actually, that wasn't my first option. My first
You mean
thought
you
was,
mean you mean you traded for the liquor?
no,
Hey,
no,
hey, hey,
no.
hey! I'm not one to judge. That's what tomorrow is. I watch wrestling and drink. It works. I'm not one to judge here.
Yeah, no, no. But like I said, my first thought was actually to get into like these big chain stores and the comic. I called so many comic book stores, and like you said, I got rejected. And I had an Excel sheet of like hundreds of comic stores. And so they, some were like, "Oh, well, send me your comic, and we'll talk about it and this and that." And um,
So
so
when
I
you
said,
send
"You
them
know what?
your comic, let me ask you a question. You send them a physical or a digital?
Um, I I sent them a digital because they were in different states, and they said, "Well, just send me the digital, and I'll tell you if we want it or not." The ones here in Miami, I took them a copy because they were close by, and so nothing really ever came about it. And I said, so then it took me back to the business mind. Where am I finding my audience? And I said, there are a lot of there are a lot of kids and there are a lot of other people who pass through. there's a lot more foot traffic in convenience stores and other places like this, because here the comic books are in places that they usually have money, and so people either don't know about them or they're not really going to them unless they actually are really looking for comics. So I got in some convenience stores, and my book happened to get picked up because it was in their vicinity, like the newspaper. And I said, well, know what? I think there's something here than trying to get into these comics and stuff, these comic book stores. And so I was on the last comic, I was doing well in these convenience stores because people go in there, they see it, they're like, oh, what is this? Pick it up, read it, they buy it.
It's also the idea that comics should be in 7-Eleven.
Right.
Whoever can get their book into 7-Eleven, that's where the comics should be. Because here's the thing, that I'll go into 7-Eleven, I'll buy a Slurpee. If there's a copy of Superman on it, I'm like, oh man, there's a bench outside. I'm drinking my Slurpee and they're reading Superman. I'm good. Yep. Like, I hate to say it. Like, me and my friends, actually, my friends never invited me. I was instead on a date with a girl, and my friends happened to be passing by, but they were going to 7-Eleven. Fun story. I still don't like my friends for that day. It was perfect, though. They made me look really good. But I digress. Your friends don't invite you, and then you see them while you're on a date with somebody. Really interesting circumstance. Right. But anyway, they went to 7-Eleven, and if I was like 20 and it's a copy of Superman, and I would grab a copy of Superman and grab my Slurpee, it'd be great. It'd be fantastic. So it makes 100% sense, because also it's the idea that convenience stores are impulse buys as well, where nobody ever looks at their bank account or contemplates their bank account at a 7-Eleven or a convenience store or a gas station. Nobody ever does. They're like, I'm having a party. This 12-pack's $30. That's a bargain. Done. Happens all the time. Maybe not $30, but nobody ever cares how much something costs in a convenience store. It's true.
Yep. And that's what I look at, unconventional ways. And like you said, there are so many comic book companies and comic books out there. And as a entrepreneur, or as you said, that business-minded person, that's what the separation comes into play, because they're looking at trying to get into a comic shop. I'm looking at getting into convenience stores and other ways. Like another way is I do Uber, and on the Uber, on my Uber profile, I list Limelight Comics. So I went to drop somebody's food off the other day, and the guy said, hey, I checked your comics out. They were pretty good. Keep up the good work. And that's a way of advertising, getting the word out.
It's very interesting. I could probably one-up you. If you were crazy enough, you should wrap your car.
I thought about that.
Because now, if you're driving Uber, people are going to then you should almost, I have a marketing idea for you after this. I'm not going to go tell you on here because it's really good, and you're going to send me your book for free as I tell you what to do. It's going to be great. But obviously it's very interesting getting into and paying attention and understanding where your market is. Obviously with my entire thing, and I'm gearing up to do a lot of interviews. I'm doing something called the Dream 100. And I'm building out my list of just the top podcasts, and not even the Dream 100. Every comic podcast, whether I can get onto them, whether I can buy ad space on them, whatever I can do. My goal is to find every single one, and I have, I think, like 15. And I've been lazy. I've been going through an HR nightmare with my job, filling out HR paperwork that I'm starting on Tuesday. So that's been taking up a lot of time, which makes sense because a day job comes first. But I'm filling that out. Then I'm going to fill it out with Instagram people. Then I'm going to fill it out with YouTube people. And all of a sudden, what starts happening is that you start figuring out how to work your way in, buy your way in, understand your way in, and it's very interesting to understand, because once you start knowing where to go, things become a hell of a lot easier, because there's only two ways how to do stuff in life. There's buying your way in or earning your way in. There are people, like I did my live read, that's called buying your way in. And then there are people who, because they're saying, you have an audience, and I want my audience to hear this. And then there's people who say, okay, I'll earn my way in. And then people do both. And at some point, I'm going to be buying and earning my way in. This week I want 2 or 3 shows, coming up in the next 4 days. That's earning my way in, and I'll buy my way in too, and it'll be great. It'll be fantastic. So it's super important to understand all that. Now, I do want to back out of this because I know you got a bunch of other things going on. And I am curious to talk about this because New York Comic Con just dropped. And obviously,
New York?
What?
Did you say New York Comic Con?
Yes, New York Comic Con.
Okay.
I did not go. The Javits Center is not friendly for me. I walk on crutches. It's not a secret. I am not, Mr. Olympia. I know you're all thinking I look good. I know it, guys. I benched 500 yesterday. Clearly, all jokes aside, the Javits Center is just not a friendly convention center for me. We walk on crutches, and so it's not a con I would like to attend. It's not a con that I am planning to attend unless I'm being paid to attend it or I am getting a lot of press for attending it. I will attend it for business and only business reasons. Having said that, though, where do you think cons are going? Because I think it went pretty well, things considering. So where do you think cons are going? Where do you think COVID's going? And where do you think all this is about to play out? Because as you and me sort of just spoke about, I think a lot of people have to figure out alternative ways beyond cons and beyond just traditional that COVID has forced us all to evolve. And I get flack for this too, because I'm part of the great digital pivot, not digitalization of comics. The great digital pivot is the pivot where you have to understand that you have to have a bigger online presence and that you need to be more on the internet and that you have to use the internet to sell your digital, physical, or anything else you would like to sell on the internet. And you have to learn how to sell your comic just as effectively in person as you can on the internet. And you have to sell better on the internet because, well, the internet, legitimately, if you know how to run a Facebook ad, you could sell 500 copies of your comic for $50 if you're really good with Facebook ads. Versus at a con, you may not be able to do that. Even with 100,000 people, that is hard to do. And I'm part of that movement that wants to sell 500 books for $50 on Facebook, and that's the great digital pivot. So I'm curious how you feel about everything that sort of is dropping, and now there's a shift, and now that cons are coming back, where do you think they're going to go? Because this shift with certain people has made them a lot of money, and there's also a lot of opposition. The people I speak to, they disagree, and me and a lot of people are very disagreeing. And this is the biggest disagreement I have in comics with people is that I speak to you and they're like, well, I prefer to sell at cons. And I'm like, I want to sell a lot of books online because I can legitimately do it faster, cheaper, and more effective. And I'm curious where you think it's all going. I know I've been rambling on about it.
Well, for me, I want to sell anywhere I can, but the cons, I've been learning about them more and more. I've been the one myself. I've heard the New York Comic Con was a success. COVID success. It wasn't pre-COVID type of numbers, but it was still good. And I think people want that. They love the cons because they can dress up, they can interact with other people, and the COVID kind of helped push people to that point to want to do it, but they're still not comfortable yet. Maybe 1 or 2 years out, it'll probably go back to pre-COVID or maybe a little better than pre-COVID because they've been locked up. But I agree with both ways. I agree with I've seen people go to cons and sell a lot. Actually, the con I went there and sold the rest of my books when I had trouble selling them online. But selling online, I've kicked up my marketing and they started selling too. So it's like you said, it's that business mind that you got to understand what you have to do and treat them a little differently. And both can be done very well, but one obviously has a lower overhead, just to a certain extent if you don't market and advertise. I think
Well,
once you get a bigger following, that helps out greatly.
and also understanding how to get a bigger following, and also
Yeah,
understanding how to make something look like you have a big following, because that helps too. That
yeah,
helps.
yeah, yeah.
With
Definitely
very little money, you could be very effective on Facebook if you know what you're doing.
right. You definitely want an active audience that's engaged with you. You know, instead of just numbers. I sometimes I feel like I have just a lot of numbers, but I don't know if it's Facebook algorithm or what's going on, but I get very low interaction.
So it's complicated because both matter. There is a shift. But also the saying is that, you know, I'm kicking up my marketing right now, and I'm about to, after I get off, I'm gonna go grab a Dr. Pepper, eat a strawberry shortcake ice cream, and build out my marketing. And do some relaxing. But the idea is that both, if I go and I run and I find 10,000 people who are interested in comics, maybe 400 of them are going to be active on my page. Maybe
Right.
out of 10,000. But guess what? You know what it is? You have to lean down, and there's a lot of stuff with Facebook marketing that matters, and really figuring out how to do it. But I digress right there. I'm getting the look from certain people in my family who are going to kill me for going this long. But the conversation's been good. But I do want to give you the opportunity for self-promotion. So where can people find you? Where can people, find the Kickstarter? I know I put the link up above. Obviously, going beyond that, where can people follow you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Obviously, your website, your other projects that are going on, and anything else that's coming up with you. Where can people also support you? Because as I stated, I want to at least help get you to your next $100 funded. And I want people to hear about this, see this book. I think this book's awesome, and I can't wait to read it myself. And then I'm super stoked for it because it looks fun. It looks like a fun book, and I know nothing about this, and that's why I'm interested. So I'm very excited for it. But having said that, obviously, the floor is yours.
People can find me just even if you just Google Limelight Comics, because I did it and it comes up. My Twitter, Facebook. I'm not really on Twitter. Facebook, Instagram. I'm on a lot, most likely because they're intertwined. They're connected. And now I'm at Limelight Comics. You go to Kickstarter, you can find us at Limelight Comics, or you can look specifically for Conquered Crowns Amazons on there. On Facebook, you can find some of our other properties that we are coming out with, and we range properties from children all the way to adults. So, yeah, and comics through graphic novels we're working on.
And there's a lot of stuff going on with you, and so obviously I recommend everybody first and foremost. And I've been saying this, and I continue to say it, you have to support indie. And what that means is you have to back Kickstarters, preferably if you like what you heard this entire time, you were watching us live, you're seeing it on replay, you have to back people's Kickstarters. Obviously, Conquered Crown Amazons, you definitely have to, back that project because, this might not be your favorite comic, but every creator, and I've said this before, and I'm going to continue to say it, is that sometimes a creator, before they find the comic that you want, that you love, you enjoy, that takes off like a rocket, they have to go through 2, 3, 4 series. Robert Kirkman did not just create The Walking Dead out of nowhere. He created about 4 or 5 series before The Walking Dead, and then The Walking Dead took off like a rocket. So that's something to keep in mind, that's something. And every Kickstarter pledge, to help fund a project helps a creator get one step forward, whether directly or indirectly. And also, this book just looks like a cool book. And if you just want a fun book, strong female leads, something that's a little bit out of the norm, I would say, and a little bit different, and you're looking for something for a little more diversity as well, this is right up that alley. Furthermore, though, and look, I believe that people should back products and projects they're super stoked for, and that if this is not your cup of tea, you have other things and that are available that people can buy. And even going beyond that, let's say somebody's tight with money, I've been there. Obviously, I'm starting a job this Tuesday, and I'm finally getting paid, so I'm very excited. So, which means I'm gonna have money again, which is gonna be fun. But I've been at points where I've had little money, you've had little money, everybody's been there. One of the things that you can do if you're in a tight money situation is that sharing it around. Tweeting out the project, tweeting out the Kickstarter, sharing it on Facebook. Liking it on Instagram, liking it on Facebook. Share it into a Facebook group, share it onto your wall. If you have a friend who's interested in this type of stuff and is looking for this, send them in a message, send it to them in a text message. It goes a long way. And sharing can be just as important, publicly or private sharing, because guess what? You never know who's watching. You never know, and Facebook's algorithms are not the same as what they used to be. There have been projects that came across my desk, and I'm like, this project is 25 days old. How did I not see this till now? And somebody that I knew shared it, and I'm like, oh, snap, this looks awesome. I'm super stoked for it. And I say to everybody here, I say, nobody does it. There are people who have not hit me up for the last 4 Kickstarters they've done. And I'm like, hit me up, because I'm not going to chase you, because I'm doing so many interviews that legitimately things get missed. And then I'm like, wait a second, you did 4 Kickstarters. How did I not see this? I'm looking at you, Mike Tenner or Teener. Like, I didn't even see your last 3 Kickstarters. Like legitimately, they, and then I just looked at it and I'm like, wait a second, you have 3 Kickstarters. How did I miss this? I legitimately just saw his 4th one that he just did, and I'm like, I missed it, and that's a testament. And I could say that about Mike, where I'm like, I missed 3 of his Kickstarters that did not appear on my wall or in any of these Facebook groups, and that's a problem. And I'm friends with Mike, and Mike's been on like I think 3 or 4 times, and that's an issue. And that's why I say to people, hit me up when you have a Kickstarter and you want to be on my show, because I will try to get you in. But guess what? Things don't come across my desk. And I ask people, certain things do come across, certain people ask me. And if you don't ask me to be on my show, I may or may not ask you. But the problem here is that things don't come across my desk. So sharing matters, and it helps tremendously. And also, I'm an indie content creator. I recommend that, I like shares, I like likes, I like hearts. It means a lot to me. It makes me feel warm and special inside. More importantly, though, and I like money too, guys, so I do have Buy Me a Coffee, my sponsorship, and my live reads really help to make sure this show continues. I am launching a Kickstarter in a few days, dealing with season 3, but in the meanwhile as well, and one of the things you can do that'll make me feel really good is buy me a coffee. The link's up above. I will tell you this, the Kickstarter prices for live reads off of that, as well as guest spots, are actually going to increase, and the Kickstarter is going to be cheaper. So if you're not a Kickstarter person or you want to spend more money, you're more than welcome to spend more money. But legitimately, the day the Kickstarter launches, those prices will increase. So if you're looking for that type of product, obviously when the Kickstarter launches, you'll be notified, you'll see it. It'll probably be on Buy Me a Coffee with the link right to it. And you can spend more money or not, but I appreciate all support on that, because running this show, even with main sponsors, is still expensive. So please support the show if you can. Obviously, support people's Kickstarters. If you support this book, you should support my show. If you support this show, you should support the book. Support David's book, not my book, because I don't have a book. And if you support my book, that's a little weird. I don't know how you can support something that's non-existent, but that's not the point. Having said all that, though, my throat is killing me after talking for almost 2 hours with you. And I'm sure you need to go do something, and I want ice cream tea and a Dr. Pepper. So I'm going to give you the final word before we go into private marketing talk.
Thank you, everybody. For those who do back the book, I'm pretty sure that I will have a series that you will like at some point. So you can follow us on Facebook as well. Engage with me, interact. Kind of available, but I usually post a pretty good amount of time. So thank you, everyone, and have a great week.
And that's a wrap.